Bruce is a risk management expert and a futurist, essentially, and my organization provides information to meeting and event planners that will help them do their jobs now and in the future. And so right now we're looking at the problems right now and then what to anticipate ahead. And that's a broad range of things. But let's start with the increasing disruptions to face-to-face gatherings. One of those being weather events. And, Bruce, I know that you've studied this extensively. Can you give us a little bit of your insight into what's happening and how bad it will get?
Sure. And welcome. Thanks for inviting me. And maybe, a little bit of background that I'm, my education, I'm actually a physicist and computer scientist later from Johns Hopkins, and spent a lot of time at NASA, NOAA. And so, kind of interesting, kind of eclectic background. And weather and climate change is definitely going to be a major issue. It has been, it's going to continue to be. As we pump more, heat into the atmosphere, you create great opportunity for more moisture and more water. And we're seeing that in California in spades right now here in the United States, where, they're just seeing unprecedented dumps of water and flooding and mudslides and those kinds of things. So the reality is the frequency and severity of storms globally, whether it's fires or weather in Europe, or whether it's what we're seeing here with hurricanes and weather, are going to be omnipresent, right, and growing. And it's going to make it more challenging to think about if you are meeting in person, where and when, right, that you're not going to walk into a disruption that's going to foil the whole plan, right? So that's where that piece is.
Okay. And so when we're planning where to meet, what would you say are going to be emerging trouble areas versus safer choices?
So safer is a broad term, right? So from a disruption perspective, there, I would say, weather always tends to be number one for, moving people around the planet, right? And then below that tends to be some local disruption, whether it's a health outbreak, whether it's civil unrest, whether it's resource availability, i.e. water, power, whatever it may be. So those are the hierarchies of issues. So, as far as weather, and I think any meeting planner knows that time of year makes all the difference, right? And so kind of avoiding well-known, for example, the hurricane season, you can expect potential disruption in that regard. But also, fires and things that we've seen. So there's good risk maps out there that gives you, that kind of data to think about where to go. We're probably going to see, migration away from the equator, so, further north, we might be holding North American conferences in Canada in the next decade, right? So, but those would be things to think about.
Okay. I want to add that anybody who has a question or a comment, you can throw something in the chat or
It'd be awesome. Yeah.
Raise your hand function.
It's always more interesting to get people.
Yeah, because we really want to talk about what you want to hear. So moving on, as the backup plan, as a risk management strategy, is a digital component what you see as the answer currently?
It's the answer, and it'll ultimately become, in my forward look, will be the norm, and in person will be exciting and special, right? But right now, a lot of conferences, you well know, have some hybrid component. And so having that as kind of a continuity of meeting operational plan that says, hey, if we can't get here, we can still hold the meeting like we're doing now. It may not be in person. We may not pump, tonnage of greenhouse gas emissions getting there, but we can still hold the meeting. So that should be, and I would think for venues and for meetings, support companies, this should be like a service that says, every space is equipped with, virtual presence, so that you can flip on a switch and say, okay, we're going to go virtual while we're in there, because maybe you're in the middle of your conference, or we can just switch to virtual and tell people stay at home, save your money, and we'll meet online.
And we did see, especially during the pandemic, properties and convention centers rolling out hybrid event studios, which, I think is a really excellent selling point in terms of, meeting planners making a decision. And they really needed to have that hybrid alternative, during COVID. Otherwise their meeting would just be canceled, and a lot of meetings did flip. We had in person to person meetings that, we right away had to learn how to do a digital meeting like this. And, using platforms that would allow one-on-one meetings. And there's so much technology that came out of the pandemic. Are you seeing, so we've also seen a lot of layoffs in the world of technology as a result of that, because everybody was throwing a shingle out and saying we can do digital meetings. Where do you see that going?
So it's interesting. So I was involved with an India conference just before the holidays in December. And they touted their conference, which is a virtual conference, around DE&I, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, and saying that they're kind of, you can imagine in India, a $500 airplane ticket is just not in the cards, right? And so they looked at it as a way to say, look, this is part of inclusion of different peoples around the globe that could participate, learn, and not have that burden of cost and time to participate. So I thought that was an interesting, and when you think about it that way, when you think about the climate change demands, you think about companies, especially in the next couple of years dealing with, cost constraints and potential recession, inflation, all that kind of thing. I think there's going to be huge demand continue regardless of the pandemic to hold virtual and hybrid events. Absolutely.
Yeah, I do. And more organizations have sustainability policies, have DEI and A, which is for accessibility policies, and the ability to allow people to participate virtually really expands the audience base, in addition to, being much more sustainable. So
yeah, I saw this question in the chat here about, that there's not a list of hybrid ready spaces. I was involved in the accommodations committee with GBTA, and I know they were talking about in the hotel profiles to starting to get hoteliers to have in their profile whether they have the ability for, VTC, virtual space, that kind of stuff. So that is brewing up through the industry. But as far as venues outside of hotels, I would hope, like Converge or whatever, that, that they likewise would tout that they have that capability.
Yeah, I'm looking at that question, and, I haven't seen a list of hybrid ready spaces, but certainly the CVB should be aware if their destination has any. We've written about some. CVB is Convention and Visitor Bureau. So it's the destination marketing organization. So for especially for larger events, they kind of serve as the hub to connect meeting planners with suppliers, whether it's hotels or convention space. They can recommend other venues for special events and that kind of thing. And they don't charge for that. That's a service of the city that they provide because they want to accommodate and attract larger events to the city. So
yeah, and when I talk to convention people like in Orlando, they're very much into the hybrid because they want the meetings to come there but still be flexible, right? And so they are very incentivized to make this happen.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of facilities don't have it yet, but they're planning to add it. During the pandemic, Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, they were, they really had a big campaign to make people aware that they were doing this. And they've added, I think 4 or 5 hybrid event studios in that one property because it was, it's really attracting business. So, where there's a need, we're going to see the growth. Can you talk a little bit about also the advances in technology with respect to gatherings and what AI and other other developments are going to do to this segment.
Yeah, and I spent yesterday, unfortunately, I was tied up today, but on a number of the sessions to kind of get a feel for the conversation and what they're thinking about and challenges. And I'm looking at it in the context as a futurist and seeing, the evolution of our kind of interactive space, right? And of course, the metaverse and all of that kind of thing. But it's coming, I would say in the last 6 years, more just kind of a slow walk. But in the last 3 months, and I think through this year and then into next, the acceleration of this concept of digital twin and virtual reality and augmented reality and these things, I mean, they're just exploding, right? And I actually work with a company called Immersive Wisdom, supporting the Defense Department, that has now created a fully immersive, essentially virtual reality command center, right? So they can just pop up a command center and have people all over the world come in and as avatars into this space and actually run a mission. They have a 3D globe and maps on the floor, and they have whatever the systems, and I can walk over to someone and create a one-to-one communication, conversation with them, just like I would in a command center. On my space, I can then share the screen that they're looking at for data, and I can walk around, and I can go and walk out a door and drop into SpaceCom command center or some other mission command center and start interacting with them. So when you look at that, and matter of fact, there's a planning room, right, where people go in and then they I just see that this and defense and those people with lots of money tend to be the bleeding edge, right?
Right.
That the whole concept of, and we've seen it with, Facebook and others playing around with virtual spaces. When you look at what's going on there and you look at what's going on with the kind of AI and this, generative technology, where what you're seeing me, with my motions, my face, my voice, my expressions, intonation, all of that is going to be replicated in a virtual space, right? And in fact, there's another company that has gloves that you can wear, an exoskeleton kind of thing, where I can actually feel and have pressure and those kinds of things in that space. So, you see this and you say, well, how far is that going to go? My God, it's when you talk about digital twin, if I can, smell and touch and be in that virtual space, that's quite a bit of, kind of sensory, interaction right. with people. So
that exists now, but
bits and pieces.
Yeah, but you expect that will become mainstream.
I think that we will have a digital avatar representation of ourselves that we can move around in different companies and try on clothes and participate in meetings and those kinds of things in pretty short order.
Short orders, couple years, 5 years?
5 years, probably. Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
I know I would have said 6 months ago, but what I see what's happening out there. Right now there's a digital physician in Japan that actually passed the American medical bars with no training. Just put it and fed the questions and had it answer, and it passed the qualification to be a physician in the United States. So
wow. So we've talked before about AI generated, robots essentially that are already coming into the hospitality space. Can you
absolutely
address that a bit?
Yeah, and that was again, with the pandemic, and that's I think what caused this compression, right? The pandemic really forced this whole kind of online virtualization, reducing, the need for human workers because of safety and that kind of thing. And, when I was in Japan, this wasn't a hotel, but it was a corporation. And I walk in and I see kind of 3 animatronic, women there, and I walk in, oh, konnichiwa, whatever in Japanese, and I walk up and said, oh, I'm here to see Mr. Hamoto. Oh, really? And they switched to English, right? And then they had a console there, and I interacted with them, and they checked me in. I got my badge. They had the person come down, their assistant, meet me in the lobby, all automatronic, no human interaction. And so that similar concept is being replicated in hotels, right? Where I can check in on my phone, or I can check in there with support. And so if you have 6 automatronic, receptionists and 1 human to handle the out of band, problems,
Right.
there you go. And robots to deliver food and check, your bags and all that kind of stuff. So that's happening quite a bit.
Right. So there's a question, can you speak about relationship building and the future of virtual meetings? I have built great relationships by attending in-person meetings and have been nurturing relationships made at virtual meetings during the pandemic, but have failed to strongly connect to the people I have met through virtual reality meetings, even though they were weekly with the same people.
Sure, 100%. And that's why this kind of immersive avatar, deep fake, even though it's like a deep reel, right? So where you're emulating that person. So for example, in immersive wisdom, I can move to that planning room, and the 2 of us can have their private conversation, but not on a flat screen. It's a 3D, I'm sitting there and you see me and my expressions, and I'm talking to you, and short of like giving you a hug, it's very much that experiential that, that we are right there talking to each other as we are now, right? And but in an immersive virtual reality space versus augmented.
Right. So, so compare it to this Zoom, it would be that, we might be, our avatars standing in a convention center or in a downtown area somewhere on a mountaintop. Is that, kind of the difference?
Yeah, if you can think about it right now, we're sitting on this flat screen with our physical presence and this 2D flat presence.
Right.
So now we have this 3D where we're immersive as 3D, you're 3D. Now we're in this space together, and you're seeing me, my face, my communication, my hands, everything. If I roll my eyes, whatever, you're having all that input now that, you just don't have here. And, and you can say, excuse me for a minute and walk out the room and maybe have to tend to something, right? So you have that whole kind of feel that you're with someone rather than this, right?
Right. That's interesting. So I think it's going to take some getting used to. Actually, the CEO of our company was just asking me about virtual reality and the implications for our industry. And he was sharing that he, at Thanksgiving, his nephew was playing a game in virtual reality where you're getting attacked by zombies or whatever it is. And he said, oh, check it out. And he put on the glasses and right away see these figures coming at him, and he punched his nephew in the face. That's super funny, but it's I think it's probably like a little scary at first. It's certainly something that will take a bit of a learning curve to get used to, but I think that there's such huge implications for it.
Well, and it's also going to be driven by commerce, right? Because I'm with work with a retailer that's working on. So you have this digital twin, which is all my body dimensions, right? So I go to the retailer, I try on different outfits and things, and I have that, and I say I want it, and then they build it on demand and have it fit me perfectly. Wow. That's where they're going in the future, so that you don't have a big, stock of warehouses and the brand, what you're, how many do I buy for the Christmas season or whatever. It's just built on demand and sent to you.
Wow. So do you see this as a risk to travel or to meetings? I mean, there's been, since for decades, a concern that technology would replace meetings, would replace travel, and it never has. It's a totally different experience. Do you see that to be the same?
Well, what I see is, and there's no question here, right? So climate change and cost and time is going to reduce travel in the sense of travel demand for the, as these kinds of technologies come in. So, if I can cut 20% of, meetings, greenhouse gas, or probably 50% of greenhouse gas emissions and those kinds of things by pivoting more to these immersive virtual experiences, it's going to happen, right? Because they're going to get better and better. And the in-person meeting, right? The in-person experience is going to be designed for that, right? So, starting to think about all the things that make actually, you can't have a substitute for, like I said, smell and touch and doing team sports or whatever, whatever it is that really makes being together, that realness real. Those meetings will still be there, but it'll be a thinner layer than just running around to have a team meeting in Austin for 2 days, right?
Right. So, that is a good segue into the work from home trend. And with more people, like we're seeing now, more meetings for the purpose of internal employee gatherings, because they're
and
not
reconnecting, right?
Yeah, they're not in the same place. So there's actually a lot of organizations are having more meetings, but the reasons for the meetings are more for their internal, the culture, the culture building and the connections between their organization employees. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And there's even, the nature of work and how we view work is also, when you look at the technologies, now this is more on the AI side, right? And these large language models and Chat GPT and all that, and the doctor that's AI doctor, that we're going to see an evolution here very quickly, again, probably on that same kind of 5 to 10 year time frame, where companies will be doing a lot of work, especially frontline kind of repetitive or just basic, diagnostic kind of thing, whether it's trying to figure out is what you want to buy, or what your accountant to figure out what your profile is, or your doctor to diagnose your illness, or whatever is going to be done with, AI augmentation, right? So reducing the need for the number of employees, but in each of those disciplines, there'll be gaps. And that, I feel, will drive much more of a gig economy where, a person that has a specialty, let's say in some aspect of, forensic accounting or whatever, where they've got to go dig into files or whatever. But the vast majority of the accounting activity is done through AI and automation. They're going to start working with 3 and 4 companies, right? And so their interactions and those kinds of things, this virtual environment will help them become, immersed in those different companies with wherever they operate from, right? And so the gig economy is definitely going to grow as there's more and more augmentation. That I think that they said somewhere in the next 5 years, virtually every professional will be augmented with AI in their job as a massive brain that brings knowledge to them so that they can, shape it and make decisions and do their job. So, virtually, every manager, every person that's doing a job. And when you look at, some of the tools that are out there, you can see that it's amazing that you can get vast knowledge out there that then is, laid in front of you in 30 seconds, right? And the challenge that we have with that right now is there's a lot of crap out there. So it kind of, you can get a 30-second answer that's completely bogus, right? And so that's the challenge right now.
It's a big challenge, like Wikipedia explodes. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
But again, things, they're working on source, pedigree and provenance and source ratings and those kinds of things, so you can have better answers.
Right. So it seems like, the menial repetitive tasks we won't be doing, and
the robots will be doing those.
Yeah, and then our jobs get to be more interesting if they aren't already interesting, because we're doing what only a human could do.
And hopefully, in some of the conversation yesterday, is I think the nature of work and life, I think there'll be more space for innovation, more space for play, more space for being human,
Yeah.
than we have right now. Yeah.
Right, right. So, there's a question about how the younger generation will drive meeting preferences. How would you address that?
Just what I just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they're very attuned to it. And I think they like the thought of not being anchored to some like work organization, but being themselves, being able to be participatory, both
Right.
with different organizations and other people, and have a very different work experience than, the Industrial Revolution 1 and 2 to date. Right?
Right, right. So you've said previously that we basically screwed ourselves in the Industrial Revolution. Can you?
Yeah, well, we migrated, 98% of humans from, rural and farm and agriculture living into cities. Yeah, we definitely changed the course of human history, which I think we may start changing it back, right? Where people are going to go back more into that lifestyle. If I live in a rural community and maybe I have some ducks and chickens and whatever, I can be me anywhere on this planet.
Right. And I think that a lot of organizations learned that in the pandemic. I know my organization did, where we really can be anywhere. We've since March 2020 started having a Zoom meeting every morning on my team, and I feel like we're more connected than we ever were. Not everyone's in the same place, most of us are, but now I feel like we can be anywhere, and we realize that when we're traveling, we can still be dealing with whatever we need to be dealing with, and it's really a different mindset to know that like I'm legit thinking about moving to Paris for a little while. I mean that it gives us that kind of freedom to make those kind of decisions. So we have another question. How do you see these shifts enabling more participation from folks who currently don't have access to many meetings? Sounds like tech could make that easier, but that might also create a new class/cost related barriers.
So it will early on, because the investment hurdle, when it becomes more kind of pervasive and available, then that will change. But there's no question in the leading edge of this, wealthy countries and wealthy organizations like DoD, will have these tools to be able to do these kinds of things. Maybe like in the 20-year time frame where it becomes more ubiquitous. It's like right now. I mean, I think we're on the track to launch 30,000 low Earth orbit satellites. And I think we're somewhere in the 15 to 16,000. I don't think people understand this like constellation that's out there. We hear about Starlink and all this kind of stuff. In the next 2 to 3 years, we will have ubiquitous broadband speed communications on every square inch of this planet.
Wow. In the next 2 years.
Next 2 years.
And
now,
will we be paying for it?
Bingo. So right now, there's that cost barrier, right? But in time, there will be organizations that are going to make that technology, the access to that very cost effective, if not free. Or there'll be stratification of populations where people that are below the poverty will have access to that, right? And so you have this whole concept now of kind of always on network and access. So when you start thinking about these technologies and that kind of accessibility, I mean, another one is, and this was recently, just in the last few months, they actually have a augmented reality contact lens, right? That's there's a bio battery that generates the power, and I put it in. It's it's 30 times the density of the screen on my phone, right? And so those kinds of technologies will change, like the whole concept of us walking around with this in our pocket, looking at it and walking and stuff. will be like, the old car phone that was in a box and you pull it up, right? Or even the old rotary telephone, the kids 10 years from now, 20 years from now are going to go, oh my God, I can't believe they had to carry those stupid things around all the time, right?
Right.
So that's what's happening, right? And I think for us, as far as human interaction and what we have to think about, how do we make that actual, physical contact opportunity extra special? And then how do we figure out how to create this ability to move and create one-on-one connections? And, maybe we just have a button that says, go gather, and the two of us disappear into another room and we can, have a chat or whatever. Those kinds of things will be evolving, and we're going to learn, and we're going to change the nature of how we live and how we work in very significant ways over the next decade.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to a tech guy at an event, and he was talking about having the virtual reality as very lightweight glasses. Or
that's the first generation glass,
right?
A lot better than the Google, and then next generation will be the contact.
Yeah. And so, like, he gave the example of, you could be at a conference and you plug into something that you want to go to room A240 and you see footsteps leading you there.
That's augmented reality. Yeah.
Right. So what are the other functionalities that we can expect with augmented reality? Things like that we'll see in our everyday lives.
So that's that whole AI integration, right? So if you think about it, I can ask myself a question. Of course, this is what Musk wants, is us to think about the question and then get the answer, but we'll do it on audio first, right? Or also our eye movements that we can move around and like essentially a mouse based on what you're looking at. So there's a lot of like human machine interaction, but at the end of the day, I would have, this massive brain out there that I could say, who are the 19 people that died today in Ukraine as a result of that, and get that answer and have that information, and then say, okay, well, put that into a news clip, and it'll write the news clip. I'll look at it and say, okay, file it.
Right. So my job is in jeopardy. And in other words,
people are, the answer is at the low end, absolutely.
Yeah,
right. And this is, somebody mentioned about this whole class cost kind of thing. You're going to end up with people that are doing work in the sense of that are going to be very specialized and have skills and things that are going to create, value add to this environment. But when does that peter out, right? So I think we have to step back at some point, and people are, to say, what is living, and how does work now fit into living versus how does life fit into work? I think we're going to make that flip.
Good. And I think we need to
Sure.
let's talk about stress. I think that
I love that question. When are we going to see facilitation robots? I'll say they're at Chuck E. Cheese right now. What are you talking about?
right. So funny.
Everybody stand up.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about people risk management in the past, which is another big concern, because we're seeing that the way we live our lives right now is, in a lot of cases, not very sustainable or healthy. And with
your brain or your body, but go ahead.
Yeah, like increasing depression and suicide and anxiety among kids, and there's all that kind of stuff that's first of all, we need to deal with that on an organizational level. But how will the advances that we're seeing in technology hopefully alleviate some of that pressure?
So again, these are all things. So when we think about like insider risk or workplace violence and all those kinds, right? Those are all like pre-behavioral indicators that are readily apparent to anybody that's actually paying attention, right? And or it's grievance, that's usually is what's driving it typically. But so anyway, by having more kind of digital twin awareness of an individual, you're going to have a lot more kind of telemetry, right? A lot more indicators about that individual's, mental state and physical health and those kinds of things. And, it'd be the kind of thing where, my car, I get an alarm on the car that says, you're due for an oil change or whatever, right? And so I think we'll start seeing that with our bodies and our minds, where, say, hey, let's take 15 minutes and have a conversation about how you feel about your mother's death or whatever, and so it'll, kind of, again, it's this whole kind of like real-time therapist that's there that is paying attention to you all the time and then pops in and helps you out and gives you a pep talk or whatever, right? So that's what I see already happening essentially, but more and more as this becomes more pervasive, and when you talk to like the ACLU and others that are in this whole kind of, how do we deal with this digital twin and our identity and our privacy, right?
Right.
And so that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother conference, in which they have now, right? How do we 100% control the information space of ourselves, right? So we don't ever give our information to anyone. Basically, we have to grant them access that we can revoke on demand, or if they need my email, they come and I see and I say, yes, you can do it. And then I train my AI self to know when to accept and when to not, and when to loop me in and that kind of stuff. So that whole kind of data concept is changing. So instead of putting our data into all the airline sites and conference sites and all this kind of stuff, it would be one place that is controlled by me, and I can revoke that data at any time, or their access to that. So when they're running their processing, they're actually pulling the data with my permission once, right? So those kinds of technologies will come eventually, probably, I don't think it'll be very robust in my lifetime, but that's the concept, that you control your digital self, right?
It's interesting. Does anyone have questions or comments? We threw a lot on the table right now. Here's one.
Yeah, Bitcoin would be one. So, but that's all. That generates more greenhouse gas emissions than like 6 major cities of the planet. But
Bitcoin does.
The huge energy sink, absolutely.
Wow. What realistic scenarios do you envision that would totally change your predictions?
Revolt, human revolt.
Yeah.
So that's why I love these kind of meetings, especially for these kinds of minds to be thinking about this stuff now, before it becomes completely off course.
Right.
And you have, 8 billion people that are like, no, we're going to crush. I mean, right now, like, people deploy these like little security robots and stuff that go around malls and that kind of stuff. The number one issue with them is vandalism.
Really?
Right? People see them and they just trash them, right? It's like they're just so annoyed, right? And so, yeah, I think human revolt is right there. I think it's a delicate, maybe unsolvable balance. So that would be one disruption.
So this is, this is a lot of stuff that a lot of people can't conceptualize. So maybe that would be fear driven. And I think that there's going to be, as things rapidly change in our everyday lives, a lot of fear that needs to be addressed.
There has to be incentive, right? And so it's our jobs to figure out, how do we create the right incentives for the outcome that we desire? Right. And right now, I don't see that as a holistic effort. I see it as a very fragmented, in a lab, and this is cool. And, it's kind of like, and unintended consequences, are not really researched that much. It's like,
Couple more questions.
Sure.
Do we have any idea what our brains will be doing when not learning and memorizing things? if we don't need to do that. I'm not optimistic given how we can no longer read maps or remember phone numbers.
Yeah, and again, I love the whole concept of play, right? And those kinds of things. I think we'll create more space for deeper, more intense human interconnections when we free ourselves up from a lot of the noise that we've created since 1860s, right? And so that's my, if I have to leave on a reason for hope, that's what I really hope. I really hope that we can segment, say, okay, here's all this stuff that just has to happen in the background. I don't want to be too involved with it, but that it works for me. I have like infinite memory and knowledge, and I can recall stuff like my mother's phone number when she lived in Newcastle, Pennsylvania in 1956 or whatever. But but what I'm focused on every day is my human relationships and my gardening and the things that create joy and purpose beyond this whole industrial technology revolution arc that we've been on. Right. I think that's where we could be. Yeah.
What do you see happening with crime and other problems like that?
Yeah, so crime, again, with technology, I think it's going to shift more to vandalism. It's you can beat the hell out of a virtual reality avatar, but it's not going to hurt me physically, right? So theft already is shifting to virtual money and Bitcoin, and we hear about that all the time. So crime's not going away because of humans, but it will not manifest itself as like it does today. Absolutely.
Okay, practical question from Elise. Let's say somebody wants to run the experiment we're creating here in a well-equipped meeting space in their area. What should they search for and where should they start?
In this 2D like video world that we're in, or are they talking about VR or AR?
Like, so in our experiment, the people have the opportunity to meet in person, right? But a lot of people don't actually go into offices anymore, or the offices they used to go to no longer exist in the same way. Or they can run a hybrid event. But I know I live in Portland, and in the Portland area, I asked our local travel bureau, I'm like, where are the hybrid ready spaces? And they said, we have no idea what you're talking about. So how do you find such places?
That's interesting. Loren, maybe that's something you guys can do, right? Maybe kick people in the butt to
Yeah, I mean, so if you talk to a convention and visitor bureau versus like a tourism organization, they might be more informed, or go directly to the convention center in your area. They might be more informed or have something on site or be able to create something with their AV teams. So I think, a good start would be whatever the, closest like real convention facility might be, or a conference center. Because they'll know what you're talking about, and they'll probably either have something or be working on something, or be able to tell you who has it.
Isn't it convene? Isn't that
convene centers is a group of conference centers that are
if they're in Portland, that would be a good group to talk to.
Yeah,
because I know they're working, they're implementing it, right?
And IAC is the International Association of Convention Centers, and they have a directory that I haven't looked at it very recently, but probably they could point you to the facilities that have that kind of AV equipment in place. Yeah. Any other?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, any other comments or questions?
Well, just another experience while we're here, because I was last week I was in San Francisco, San Ramon. I was with a corporate client doing virtual reality security training, right? And again, very experiential. And so they had them walking through Tijuana or some fictitious Mexican town. and and being presented with potential threats, real threats, right? And they had to kind of, work their way through and react to that. And so why was I there, right? Because, when they finished with that, it's like, okay, now how are we going to like take that input from the participants and work through and give them strategies and where they, so it's not there yet for that part of it. So they still need a human to fly in across the country and participate and to actually give them, yes, you had this experience and you kind of felt things and learned things, but what are you going to do with that? What actions should you take, right?
Right.
And then we did that, and then we had them go back and do a similar, different city, but similar thing and see how they performed. Did they learn from the strategies of those things that we gave? And they all did. So, and of course that gives them positive feedback. It comes to that classic thing where you go to something and you train, and 6 hours later you lose 20% of what you learned, and a day later it's 50%, and a week later it's like you never went there, right? And so if you don't do after you learn, it doesn't imprint, right? It doesn't stick. And so that's what this, so just kind of give you an idea of like what's out there and happening today, right?
You probably see better learning with your, avatar, your virtual twin being experiencing something even in the virtual world versus just listening to someone talk.
Hi.
Hi, I have a question. I mean, at the very beginning of this session, you said that digital will become the norm and that in person kind of will be the special meeting. And you gave us all kinds of, ideas that have popped up in the last years. I would call them metaverse-ish type ideas of people get in 3D immersive environments. And then the hope kind of is that when we're in these virtual environments, then it all gets back to the same quality of experience as it was in person. And what I was wondering is if there's any actually research, evidence, peer-reviewed kind of data that suggests we go from in-person, go into Zoom boxes. Now we have these social chat applications, and eventually we go into like full immersive environments. And I believe we're kind of hoping that gives us something back, because other research shows virtual environments curb creativity and innovation, as we heard yesterday from Melanie, for example. Yep. So where on that path from, Zoom boxes to social chat to immersive 3D, do we get some of that back? Do we have to go all the way? Because I think personally, this is, I guess, rather an opinion, it's really sexy, this 3D stuff, but a shitty way of communicating in 3D isn't better than in real life. So if I don't have good structures to communicate, I'm not getting anything out of it, no matter how realistic the virtual environment is. So what's your take on that?
So actually, the groups like, for example, the US Department of Defense that is spending a lot of money on this technology, focusing on more interaction as far as information exchange and performance. So they're not really looking at necessarily innovation, even though it's probably part of that. So they are doing, research, and they are, getting data and trying to understand, is this going to create a decision advantage for them, right? A performance advantage, or is it just going to be the same or worse, right? So they are definitely, looking at that as they spend, millions and millions of dollars. I don't know. I think there's no question right now. I mean, I think there is peer-reviewed research that says this 2D virtual kind of gathering kind of thing is not constructive. I mean, it's like, Marta's sitting up there, looking at this, and I can't like turn to her and say, what do you think? What do you think about all this stuff? I'm asking you that right now, Marta. What do you think?
I was thinking my thought, I got disrupted in the moment you said before they were were going to train virtual reality, and they were in a city in Tijuana or some Mexican city. And I was thinking, how about making this city in Chicago or whatever? Why? What do we transport in bias through this technology still in the next
they don't want to
generation of
admit that Southside
experience?
Chicago is more dangerous than Tijuana. They don't want to admit that.
Yeah. So what do we communicate when we made these worlds, these virtual worlds? So that was what I was wondering.
No question that there's bias, and it's like the whole, you go to Mexico, you're going to get kidnapped, right? And those kinds of things. So yeah, absolutely, no question. So, and Kai, so I don't know. I think again, as researchers, these would be the kind of things. But I think if you look at even the German defense, because I know they're doing some work, UK, US, and see who's doing that work, and see what kind of research you might go to get your hands on. None of the stuff that I've seen is classified, so I think it's just not readily reachable, if you do a search on the internet. But I think if you reach out, like if you look at Immersive Wisdom, look who they're working with, and go talk, connect with that lab and see what they have. I think they will be very open to that. So.
Okay, well, we need to wrap up. We threw a lot of good topics on the table, and I'm happy to talk to anybody at any kind of follow-up, and I'll put my email address in the chat, and if Bruce, if you want to do that as well. But thank you all for your participation and your questions, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been really fabulous to get this perspective of what it means to travel in space or not travel in space and time. And
or when we're in quantum, we can be in two places at one time finally. So there you go.
Oh, see, very Star Trek. One of my favorite podcasters is all Star Trek leadership. Very nice.
All right.
Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break before our next session for life to happen. So if you have some life that needs to happen on yourself, please do that. Loren and Bruce, we will have this recording up. So there are 300 people involved who will see this over the course of the next couple of days. Will you be okay with us including your contact information for them to follow up with questions too? Fabulous.